Jacob Zuma's MK party is something of a refuge for South Africa's alleged state capture perpetrators. There's Zuma himself, whose corruption rap sheet hardly requires further unpacking. And don't forget about Brian Molefe, Siabonga Gama and Lucky Montana, prominent party members who now represent MK in Parliament. During the years of the Zuma-led state capture project, Molefe, Gama and Montana were in charge of some of the key state-owned entities that became the sites of major corruption scandals. Lucky Montana, meanwhile, the former CEO of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, or PRASA, was recently all over the news regarding his tax affairs. But there's a deeper story that goes well beyond Montana's tax returns, one that most news outlets fail to deal with. Today, I'll run you through the 4.5 billion rand PRASA state capture contracts that lie at the heart of Montana's ongoing battles with the South African Revenue Service, or SARS. My first major break as an investigative journalist came in 2015. I'd been investigating PRASA, an important state-owned entity tasked with delivering reliable rail transport to all South Africans. PRASA, like many SOEs during the Zuma era, had become rife with corruption and maladministration. I exposed the notorious 3.5 billion rand Swifambo contract, which involved PRASA procuring locomotives that weren't suited for the country's rail lines. But this wasn't the only dodgy multi-billion rand project PRASA had invested in during Montana's time as CEO. In 2009, PRASA began dishing out contracts to a company called Siangena Technologies, majority owned by Pretoria-based businessman Mario Ferreira. Siangena was appointed to install access gates, CCTV cameras and other security equipment at some of PRASA's train stations in Gauteng. At first, the contracts were worth around 800 million rand, but in the ensuing years, PRASA gifted Siangena more and more work. By 2014, Siangena had clinched PRASA contracts worth an eye-popping 4.5 billion rand. This was to install security equipment at more than 200 PRASA train stations across South Africa. In other words, under Lucky Montana's stewardship, Siangena's initial contract, valued at less than 1 billion rand, ballooned to a multi-billion rand package of work. Siangena's questionable PRASA fortunes would later come under severe fire on several platforms. The Public Protector, the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Zondo Commission all basically found that PRASA Siangena contracts had been awarded unlawfully. The courts also found that the contracts were possibly corrupt. Perhaps the worst part of the sorry saga is the fact that much of the equipment Siangena installed at the train stations was badly designed and not fit for purpose. So, how do PRASA's 4.5 billion rand Siangena contracts relate to Lucky Montana's tax battles with SARS? The revenue collector had been gunning for Montana because he supposedly owes the taxman 55 million rand. SARS, which has instituted legal proceedings against Montana, claims the former PRASA boss had received undeclared income to the tune of millions of rands. Some of these payments overlapped with his time as PRASA CEO. For instance, unknown entities or persons had deposited nearly 14 million rand into Montana's bank accounts. Someone had also contributed more than 10 million rand towards luxury vehicles Montana owned during that period. What's more, Montana had also built up a property portfolio valued at nearly 40 million rand. Montana's property purchases have tax implications that the revenue collector hopes to remedy through its ongoing proceedings. How does the CEO of a state-owned entity accumulate that much wealth? The answer to that question, by all appearances, partly lies in the 4.5 billion rand contracts PRASA had awarded to Siangena. In 2015, while working for a Sunday newspaper, I first reported on suspicious property transactions that seemingly tied Lucky Montana to Siangena. One such property was located in Parkwood, Johannesburg. Montana in 2014 sold the house to a shelf company called Precise Trade and Invest for roughly double the market value. This appeared highly suspicious. Several estate agents in the area told me that they couldn't believe someone would fork out that much money for the property. I had to ask myself, was someone perhaps lining Montana's pockets by buying his property at an inflated price? Closer inspection revealed that my hypothesis wasn't entirely unreasonable. As it turned out, the director of Precise Trade and Invest, the shelf company that purchased the property, was a Pretoria lawyer with close links to Siangena Technologies. Jan Adrian or Rian van der Walt had even once acted as Siangena's spokesperson in an unrelated matter. Van der Walt was also alleged to be close to Mario Ferreira, who, through a holding company, effectively owned Siangena. The Parkwood transaction, meanwhile, wasn't even the most suspicious Montana property deal during that period. In July 2015, the then PRASA boss became the owner of a gigantic 6,000 square meter property in Hurlingham, one of Johannesburg's most sought-after neighborhoods. The purchase price was 13.5 million rand. Astonishingly, Montana did not even obtain a bank loan to buy the place. In 2016, I revealed that some of the funds for Montana's property dealings could be traced back to Siangena's holding company, and that Ferreira had allegedly played a key role in channeling the monies to the Hurlingham transaction. It was only much later, though, at the Zondo Commission, that we learned just how dodgy Lucky Montana's property dealings actually were. The Commission's investigators found indelible evidence that Van der Walt, the lawyer linked to Siangena and Ferreira, had used funds from Siangena's holding company in order to conclude the property deals involving Montana. For instance, when Van der Walt's shelf company bought Montana's Parkwood pad at an inflated price, it did so with funds that were paid into the shelf company's account by none other than Siangena's holding company. Siangena's holding company also channeled funds to Van der Walt's shelf company in 2015, monies that were then used so that Montana could acquire his palatial Hurlingham property. These dealings have all the makings of alleged corruption, complex property purchases that were designed to disguise alleged kickbacks being funneled to Montana. The nexus that tie Montana, Van der Walt and Ferreira to PRASA's dodgy 4.5 billion rand Siangena contracts is worthy of the Hawks and the MPA's most urgent attention. It is one thing for Montana to find himself in SARS's crosshairs, but if there are criminal implications as a result of these dealings, Montana and his associates need to be held to account. Keep following Daily Maverick for more on this and other state capture and corruption developments. By the way, you can support our journalism by becoming a Maverick Insider. You'll find all the details in the caption of this video.